The SWAT battering ram hit the Vexton door before I'd even finished exporting the footage that proved what his mother tried to erase. Corliss Vexton, vice president of the Summerfield Bluffs HOA, watched from her porch like it was a play she hadn't paid to attend. Her arms were crossed. Her robe was silk. Her son was inside, and she didn't flinch when the glass cracked. "You're making a scene," she said to me earlier that day, lips pursed, unbothered. "I told you, he was just checking on your daughter's thermostat." She said it like she was doing us a favor, like we should be grateful her adult son had let himself into our home. I didn't answer her. I just showed her the clip, the one she thought she had wiped from the HOA logs. A quiet blink from my daughter's planetarium lamp. A shadow crossing the ceiling. Then Thayer's face, partially lit by the galaxy she sleeps under. She didn't blink. She said, "You're overreacting." That's when I opened my laptop and synced the backup to the federal node. That's when I filed the submission that got me a callback in under 20 minutes. That's when Rowan, my husband, recused himself. And that's why you're going to want to subscribe right now. Because what you're about to hear is not just about an HOA gone too far. It's about the exact moment a predator was caught trying to use the system to bury what he did, and how a quiet family with the right skills buried him instead. My name is Dr. Maddox Train. I teach cyber operations and forensic ethics to people who make decisions at the federal level, people who understand chain of custody law, encryption integrity, signal spoofing, and digital exploitation. But today I wasn't lecturing. I was watching the front of the Vexton house implode in real time as a battering ram punched through it like a spine cracking. Rowan's team was methodical. He wasn't on it, of course. He couldn't be. But the moment I showed his superiors what I had, timestamps, access override trails, biometric login mismatches, plus unedited smart home pings, they'd called it in under probable cause Class A. Still, none of that mattered to me more than the lamp. My daughter, Lyra, is 15. She was born with a sensory integration disorder, and she has good days and hard ones. That lamp, the one that got us our violation notice from the HOA, projects constellations across her ceiling. It's been part of her bedtime since she was 5. And when she woke up last week crying because someone was in the stars, I didn't dismiss her. I started pulling logs. I didn't expect to find anything at first, maybe just an update delay or a signal conflict with the new router mesh we'd installed. But what I found was deeper. The HOA had recently issued us a notice claiming our lamp's external spill violated visual uniformity standards. It was laughable. The bylaws didn't even mention lighting, and yet Corliss Vexton cited us personally, naming Lyra's room. She attached an image taken from an angle no one should have had. The HOA controls community maintenance, trash scheduling, sidewalk inspections, and recently they'd begun a climate compliance initiative requiring all homes to submit to HVAC audits from approved contractors. That's how Thayer got in. He used a falsified override badge, logged into our smart hub using a cloned access key, and entered my daughter's room during school hours when she was home sick with the flu. I wouldn't have known, except the lamp caught his shadow. And one last thing he didn't expect, that lamp was on my network. And I wrote the firmware. So yeah, when Corliss Vexton said, "You'll regret pushing this," I said nothing. Because I didn't have to push. I just had to watch the timecode sync and keep my hand steady until the breach was done. SWAT moved fast. 31 seconds from van doors to hallway clear. Thayer Vexton didn't even make it past the kitchen. They found 2 drives, 3 cloned key cards, and a camera with partial footage still in cache. But it was the lamp, Lyra's stars, that had seen him first. I sat in my office, tracking every second with my breath held. Because I wasn't just watching a breach, I was watching a father keep a promise. The violation notice was printed on pearl gray cardstock with a gold embossed HOA seal, like it was something to be proud of. It was taped to our door at 6:43 a.m. before the sun came up, before I'd even made coffee. Lyra was still asleep, her planetarium lamp casting its soft rotations across the ceiling like a slow-motion galaxy. Rowan stood behind me in his socks, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Exterior light color breach," I read aloud, scanning the flimsy justification. Specifically, projected hues inconsistent with HOA night tone policy. Rowan tilted his head. Night tone policy? That's not in the covenants. I didn't respond. I already knew it wasn't. I'd reviewed the HOA's digital CC&Rs 2 weeks earlier when they tried to fine us for putting a garden bench too close to the curb. That notice had quietly disappeared after I quoted subsection law from Virginia's Residential Property Disclosure Act. This was different. The citation included a screenshot, a photo of our house taken at night from a raised angle, zoomed in on Lyra's bedroom window. The stars from her lamp glowed faintly through the sheer white curtains. That image sent a chill down my spine, not because it existed, but because of where it was taken from. Our street doesn't curve that way. There's no natural elevation. Whoever took that photo was on private property. I pulled up the HOA member list and skipped straight to the vice president's name, Corliss Vexton. The same name printed in cursive at the bottom of the notice. The signature curled like it was proud of itself. At the next HOA meeting, I showed up early. The clubhouse was empty except for folding chairs and a fresh tray of stale cookies. Corliss walked in last, wearing a deep green blouse, gold earrings, and the kind of smile reserved for passive threats. She took her seat with theatrical calm and began flipping through papers as if no one else existed. I waited for the floor to open. When it did, I stood. I'd like to address the violation issued to my family regarding lighting. Dr. Train, Corliss interrupted, not looking up. This isn't the forum for technical disputes. The board has full discretion under the aesthetic variance clause. A clause which doesn't exist, I said louder, and the image you attached was taken from an illegal angle, most likely my side fence. That's trespass. Corliss finally looked up. We act on neighbor reports. I don't choose the angles. But you sign off on them? She shrugged. Would you rather I ignore neighbor complaints? The lamp is unusual, unsettling to some. It casts movement. It casts constellations, I said, for my daughter, who has a medical diagnosis, which is protected. She raised an eyebrow. We're not doctors. We're just neighbors trying to maintain consistency. I realized then that this wasn't about lighting. It wasn't even about bylaws. It was about control. The HOA wasn't enforcing a policy. They were creating one, targeting the family least likely to comply, quietly. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten. I simply said, if this continues, I'll audit every digital entry log for the past month. Let's see what else your consistency covers. Corliss smiled. You're free to review anything the community portal offers. As a reminder, unauthorized network scanning is against HOA policy. And just like that, she warned me not to touch the infrastructure I used for a living. I walked out before the meeting ended. Rowan was waiting in the car with Lyra. She was in the back seat, curled up, earphones in. The planetarium lamp remote sat in her lap. She carried it everywhere now, like a tether. That night, I examined our logs, everything the HOA portal wouldn't show. I traced unusual pings at 2:17 a.m. 2 nights ago, coming from a masked IP tied to the community router array. The signature was familiar, but incomplete, like a clone of our guest access pass had been inserted and withdrawn before the full handshake finished. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled. My instincts weren't wrong. Something had already crossed our threshold. Not just Corliss's smug words, not just a camera angle. Something or someone had stood inside our digital walls. I turned off the lights, left the laptop running, and checked Lyra's door 3 times that night. She slept under the stars, unaware that the galaxy above her head might have been the only witness to what came next. Elliot Kress didn't talk much at board meetings, which is probably why no one noticed the way his jaw clenched. When Corliss read off the 3rd violation of the night, non-uniform siding color detected on the west-facing elevation of 9 Crescent Maple, she announced. Formal notice issued. There was a pause as a woman near the back audibly scoffed. Her house had been freshly repainted that month, at HOA suggestion. Corliss ignored it. Elliot didn't. He stood from his technician's chair in the corner, adjusted his badge lanyard, and walked to the side table where the security laptop sat tethered to the network. I watched him plug in an external drive, run diagnostics, and keep his eyes on the floor. He didn't look up once during the entire discussion. After the meeting ended, as board members filed out and Corliss lingered at the front, chatting performatively with another resident, I approached the corner where Elliot was silently winding up cords. "You're the system tech, right?" I asked. He blinked, slow. "That's what they call me." I have a question about the HOA camera feed from Maple and Sycamore. The board's violation image of my daughter's window was taken from an angle outside the community polls. He tensed just barely, then resumed wrapping cables. I don't control the cameras, I just maintain them. But you know what's on the server. He looked up then, first time I saw anything crack behind his eyes. Not fear exactly, more like weight. The kind that builds when someone's been told to look the other way one too many times. Some footage gets overwritten fast, he said, voice low, if the admin requests it. And Corliss is the admin. He didn't answer that. Just gave me a tiny shake of his head, like someone refusing to nod yes, but unable to lie outright. That was the moment I knew. Not guessed, knew. The footage existed, or had existed, and someone with elevated credentials had either redirected it or deleted it from public audit. The problem was that HOA servers weren't government systems. They ran on lightweight security layers, minimal authentication, and a patchwork of cloud drives usually operated by whoever volunteered tech help last. In Summerfield Bluffs, that person was Elliot. I stepped closer. You can't be the only one seeing this. You know something crossed the line. Elliot hesitated, then glanced around the empty hall. You ever heard of subdirectory masking? He asked quietly. I teach it. Then you already know I've seen things I can't pretend not to. He didn't say more, didn't need to. The way his hands trembled slightly as he coiled the final cord told me more than any confession. He wasn't just disturbed. He was breaking under the weight of what he'd helped bury. Outside the clubhouse, Corliss and Thayer were laughing. Thayer leaned against her SUV, holding a smoothie, and wearing the same smug smirk I'd seen in the background of HOA promotional brochures. He waved at me like we were old friends. I didn't wave back. At home, Lyra was asleep on the couch, the lamp casting Orion's belt across her hoodie. Rowan stood nearby, arms crossed, watching a muted news broadcast. He didn't look at me when he spoke. Another camera outage on the west sector. HOA claims squirrels chewed the wiring. They always do, I muttered. I sat down and pulled up my side channel access. Non-invasive port mirroring I'd embedded months ago into our own smart grid as a teaching tool. I'd used it to show my students how neighborhood traffic routes looked when mapped across unsecured mesh networks. Now I used it to trace latency spikes, packet collisions, time of day variance patterns. One name showed up again. Krez Remote RX1. Elliot had left a door open. Not wide, but enough. 3 log entries, 2 encrypted, 1 mislabeled as backup sync. I flagged the packet headers. All had been routed through a mask subdirectory and assigned temp admin status. I didn't open them that night. I needed to approach this correctly, but I knew, somewhere on that drive, inside whatever Elliot had rerouted, was the moment Thayer crossed into my home. The next morning, a plain manila envelope appeared inside my mailbox. No return address, no name, just a flash drive, sealed in anti-static plastic, and a single sticky note. Don't let her wipe it again. EK. I stared at it for a long time. Inside my house, Lyra's stars blinked quietly above her, unaware that someone else had seen them first, and captured something he was never meant to. The next letter didn't come in an envelope. It came in a red sticker slapped across our front door, in full view of the neighbors. I was still in my gym clothes when I spotted it. Bold white text screaming, "Final notice, non-compliance," with a date for mandatory in-home inspection stamped across the bottom. It was signed again by Corliss Vexton, vice president of the HOA. Rowan leaned against the doorframe behind me, arms folded. "They're not even pretending anymore," he said. I peeled the sticker off slowly, careful not to tear it. My hands were steady. My pulse wasn't. This time, it wasn't about lighting. The notice claimed HVAC irregularities had been detected via satellite energy readings. It referenced a community ordinance that didn't exist in any public records I'd reviewed. But it carried a scheduled time, 3 p.m. Friday, for a board-approved contractor to conduct an efficiency compliance assessment. Rowan stared at the paper. "They're trying to get in." I know. We both knew what this was. It was cover. They were sending Thayer back in, this time with a clipboard and a badge. I didn't wait. I drove straight to the HOA office, cut through the rows of pastel filing cabinets, and found Corliss sipping lemon water behind her oversized glass desk. She looked up when I entered, but didn't greet me. Her fingers tapped the base of her cup, like she'd been expecting me. "You received the notice," she said simply. "You forged an ordinance." "I formalized a pilot program," she corrected. "The board approved it unanimously. Summerfield Bluffs is proud to be on the forefront of environmental compliance." "Your son has no certification to conduct an inspection," I said. She smiled without teeth. "He's shadowing a licensed contractor. No such contractor is listed." She tapped a manila folder on her desk. "You're welcome to verify with our compliance coordinator. He'll be joining the inspection team." "What exactly do you expect to find in my daughter's room?" Her smile faltered for a second. Just a fraction of hesitation. But it was there. Then it was gone. "That depends on whether you've brought your home into alignment with community standards." I left without another word. Back home, I reviewed the footage again. The flash drive Elliot gave me included a time-stamped clip, short, no sound, but clear. Thayer stepping through our side entrance with a tablet in one hand and what looked like a slim camera case in the other. The planetarium lamp wasn't in the center of the shot, but it lit the edges of the ceiling enough to cast a silhouette. He never looked directly at the lens, but he moved with confidence, familiarity. I layered the clip with our internal smart home logs. The match was perfect. Entry detected. Airflow sensors shifted. Voice command interference registered on the speaker in Lyra's room. Just 3 pings, not enough to activate playback, but enough to signal attempted access. I ran the metadata through forensic filters. No anomalies. It was clean, raw, untouched. It was enough. I called Rowan. "You have to go through someone else now," he said. "I know. I'm not calling as your husband. I'm calling as an expert witness." There was a pause, then the quiet shift of fabric as he stood. "Okay, then speak slowly. I'm patching this through." That night, I installed a second-layer network trap. It piggybacked off the lamp's firmware and logged every incoming handshake request within 20 microseconds of broadcast. It didn't block them, it watched them. Quietly, patiently. The next day, 3 new pings came in at once, one from a mobile tablet assigned to HVAC compliance officer, 2 from known HOA network IDs. They didn't make it past the handshake. The script captured all 3 MAC addresses, encrypted the packet headers, and sent them to a sandboxed archive. At 2:49 p.m., a knock came at the door. I didn't answer. Instead, I pulled up the live feed. Thayer Vexton stood there with a clipboard in hand and a contractor's vest draped over his hoodie. He knocked again, louder this time. A second figure, shorter, older, stood beside him, nervously checking a smartwatch. They waited 2 more minutes, then left. The log ended. But the data? That was just beginning. It started with a flicker in the room, a tiny blink in the far right quadrant, of the ceiling so fast I almost missed it. I was reviewing motion sensor logs when it triggered again. 2 blinks, 4 seconds apart, same quadrant. Lyra's planetarium lamp wasn't set to do that. I turned on the full visual recording buffer. What I saw wasn't a glitch. It was a shadow, thin, angular, and moving across the upper wall like someone had stepped between the lamp and the far panel. It wasn't Lyra. She'd been at her piano lesson across the street. Rowan was with her. I was in my office. No one was supposed to be in that room. I cross-referenced the lamp's onboard recording cache. It was only supposed to retain projection settings and LED diagnostics, but I'd once installed a memory overflow test to log ambient light patterns, something I'd never removed. It wasn't meant to capture footage, but under the right conditions, it could recreate movement through differential mapping. I parsed the archive and aligned it with the time of the motion spike. The frames built themselves in low resolution, fuzzy, washed out, but enough to render shapes: a person, tall, hat brim forward, backpack slung over one shoulder, standing in Lyra's room for 37 seconds, long enough to place something down, then gone. I ran a second diagnostic on the smart lock system. There were no open entries recorded during that window. The main door stayed locked. The garage door never lifted. But the side access door, normally unused, connected to the breaker path, registered a soft bypass code at 3:41 p.m. That code belonged to the HOA master badge, which wasn't supposed to exist. I checked the HOA database. The badge ID had been listed inactive for 6 months. The name associated with the override wasn't Thayer Vexton. It was Emergency Maintenance Override A12, generic, system level, assigned to no one, and yet it had been activated twice in the last week, both times during hours when Lyra was home. The first time I stared at that blinking light, I tried to talk myself down. Maybe it was motion from a bird outside. Maybe the angle was just coincidental. Maybe the diagnostics were wrong. But now I had raw proof. Someone had bypassed our lock using HOA credentials and entered my daughter's room. Again. And this time, I knew exactly what I was looking at. I accessed the smart speaker logs. 3 failed voice command activations occurred during the intrusion window. Someone had whispered near it, likely trying to trigger recording. But Lyra's speaker had been customized. I'd disabled remote listening functions and required biometric voice confirmation. They wouldn't have known that. They tried to use her speaker to record. I launched a deep packet inspection script to trace where the handshake originated. It wasn't from inside our house. It was rerouted through a subnet that only existed in the HOA security cabinet. The relay had bounced off a mesh repeater node, a hidden one not listed in the HOA's infrastructure diagram. Whoever used it knew how to mask themselves inside the local network and make it look like nothing ever touched our system. Except it did. Because I'd installed something Thayer never would have anticipated. An old forensic utility built into the lamp's microcontroller. Something simple, passive signal listening, with low voltage pull on digital lines. It recorded metadata from nearby devices as a debugging feature. And Thayer's device had pinged it. A partial MAC address, a signal ID, the tail end of a session string that matched a network scanner I'd seen once before, during a case I testified on 2 years ago. The scanner wasn't public software. It was proprietary, used by federal forensic analysts and advanced penetration testers. And someone had taught it to Thayer. I sat back in my chair and closed my eyes for a moment. This wasn't just HOA power abuse. This was someone with training, or access to someone who had it, using HOA credentials to gain illegal entry, plant recording devices, and wipe logs while hiding behind maintenance inspections. And my daughter's room had been their testing ground. I packaged the session log, metadata trail, lamp diagnostic output, and lock bypass timestamp into a single encrypted archive and tagged it for external review. Then, I sent a secure message to Rowan. We have chain of custody, probable cause, and illegal use of federal-level toolkits. You need to recuse yourself, but someone needs to open this case, now. Rowan didn't reply right away. That's how I knew he took it seriously. Normally, he'd shoot back a confirmation or a tight-lipped on it. But after I sent the encrypted archive and flagged the forensic trail with a federal scanner signature, I waited 2 full hours before my phone buzzed with a single line. I'm officially off the case. It's moved to Strategic Crimes Division. That was the moment it stopped being personal and started being federal. But it was still personal for me, because the camera was still missing. Thayer had clearly taken something out of Lyra's room. I could track his digital footprints all day long, but unless I found the device itself, or the footage it might have captured, I didn't have the final nail. I had everything but the thing that would shut the door for good. At 11:14 p.m. that night, I heard something from Lyra's room. Not loud, not urgent, just a shift. I moved quickly but quietly down the hall, careful not to startle her. When I opened the door, she was sitting up, knees tucked under her chin, eyes wide but dry. The lamp was still cycling overhead, slowly painting stars across the ceiling. "What's wrong?" I asked, kneeling beside her. She didn't speak at first. Then, after a long pause, she whispered, "I turned it off, but it came back on." I checked the remote. The batteries weren't loose. The power function hadn't been triggered by accident. I opened the app, control on my phone, and saw no recent activity. But when I opened the back-end diagnostics, I saw a ping. Someone had accessed the lamp's firmware interface, remotely. For the first time, the attacker wasn't just watching. They were testing my defenses. Thayer, or whoever was guiding him, was trying to see what I'd modified, whether I could see him back. I sent Lyra to sleep in the guest room across the hall and disconnected the lamp from the main power entirely. Then I ran a sweep of the room, thermal, signal, acoustic. I scanned the baseboards, the walls, the vent duct. Nothing. But when I moved to the closet, something didn't feel right. There was a fine scuff along the top shelf, barely visible unless you angled the flashlight just right. A long, narrow scrape along the plastic. I pulled the shelf forward slightly and found a thumb-sized recess carved into the drywall, no more than an inch deep, smooth around the edges. Inside was a tiny magnetic dot. It was a mount for a pen-sized camera, but the camera was gone. What remained, however, was more than enough. Whoever had installed it left behind a flake of adhesive tape, commercial grade, thermal reactive, used in motion-activated micro-capture units. I scanned the surface for oil residue and extracted a partial fingerprint from the mount edge, wiped but not completely. I didn't have the resources to match it, but strategic crimes would. I carefully bagged the material, photographed everything with timestamp and geo-coordinate overlays, and added it to the growing dossier I was building. I backed it all up to a read-only volume and uploaded it to the case file node Rowan had quietly pointed me toward before recusing himself. The next morning, a dark gray SUV parked across from our house, unmarked. 2 agents stepped out, plainclothes, business casual, but alert in the way people are when their shoes are too clean and their posture too square. They didn't knock, they just stood across the street and watched. It wasn't intimidation, it was preparation. Someone higher up was now involved. Inside, Lyra watched them from the living room window without asking questions. She was eating dry cereal out of the box, wrapped in a blanket, her headphones looped around her neck, but silent. I sat beside her. She leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered, "He's not coming back, right?" "No," I said. "He's not." But I didn't mean Thayer. I meant the version of me who thought this neighborhood was safe, who thought the bylaws were just annoying, not weaponized, who believed my daughter's silence was a sensory thing, not a trauma response. That version of me was gone, and the man who replaced him had just activated every tool in his arsenal. I would burn this structure down by its own legal kindling. I wasn't just going to stop them, I was going to expose how deep it went. Elliot Krez showed up at my front door 2 days later, holding a potted plant. It was a ridiculous attempt at camouflage. Terracotta pot, drooping fern, a plastic ribbon around the rim like it came from a hardware store's garden section. But his eyes weren't casual. They scanned everything, the windows, the badge on the SUV parked down the street, the camera tucked just above our porch light. He didn't say hello, just nodded once, tight, and walked in when I stepped aside. "Can't talk long," he muttered, brushing soil from his fingers. "They're watching me." He moved like a man who hadn't slept. His clothes were wrinkled, collar damp from sweat. He sat on the edge of my entryway bench, hands gripping his knees. "They pulled me off server maintenance this morning," he said. "Said they'd moved to an external vendor for compliance assurance. Which means they're scrubbing everything you might have left behind." He nodded. "Corliss had me reroute the logs through a shadow node weeks ago. I didn't realize what it was at first. Just thought she wanted off-books footage of landscaping issues or violations she couldn't justify. But then Thayer started pulling badge access and demanding timestamps for homes he wasn't assigned to." He looked up at me. "Yours was first, then 3 others, all with daughters." My pulse ticked hard at the edge of my jaw. "I only kept fragments," he went on. "Can't store full video without triggering the system audit flags. But I made hash copies, enough to verify access times and user trails." "Where are they?" Elliot reached into the pot. Buried under the soil, sealed inside a thin polymer pouch, were 3 micro SD cards. I took them without a word and scanned them in the hallway reader, each one auto-encrypted, locked to a decryption key Elliot scribbled on the back of a gas receipt from his truck. "They've started remote wiping," he said. "Even stuff I thought was air-gapped. They're using hardware triggers. Someone on the board knows tech. Or someone outside the board is advising them." He hesitated, then added, "I think Corliss is getting help." I closed the door behind him. He didn't wait for thanks, just muttered something about a plumbing errand and disappeared around the block with his plant. I uploaded the data and let the decryption run. 1 file at a time, the logs emerged, access codes, camera movement history, side door badge swipes, and the timestamp string that finally aligned everything. Thayer had entered our property 5 times, 2 during daylight, 3 while Lyra was home. On one occasion, his entry overlapped with my own smart home footage, which meant strategic crimes could now legally cross-confirm data sources. But What mattered most was that someone else had overridden the badge control parameters before each intrusion. Not Thayer. Corliss. Her credentials, admin level, encrypted with signature tokens, had been used to enable the master badge, deactivate external alerts, and flag the sessions as test mode, which meant no alerts, no audit notifications, no logs uploaded to the resident dashboard. She'd built him a tunnel, and now I had the map. I sent the data to the case handler assigned to the breach. 5 minutes later, I received a ping back. A new federal node was opened, classified under a Tier 2 digital exploitation case. I wasn't given details, just a confirmation. Your chain of evidence is intact. Your witness has been noted. I stared at that message for a long time, then went to Lyra's room, where she was laying flat on the floor, her eyes tracing the projected stars above. "Hey," I said softly. "Want to help me pick new constellations for the lamp?" She looked at me, cautious. "Are we allowed?" "You're allowed," I said. "I fixed the rules." She didn't answer, just scooted over and patted the carpet beside her. I laid down, letting the blue halo of stars spin over us. One of them blinked, just a flicker from the lamp's lens, but this time it didn't feel like danger. It felt like control returning. Outside, the SUV down the block had company now. 2 more parked along the corner, quiet and watchful. They weren't here to watch us. They were here for when the next mistake happened. And with Corliss Vexton still walking around in pearls, smiling like this neighborhood was hers, that mistake was coming. The first time I taught a digital counterintelligence course, I opened with a rule. The louder someone insists they're protecting you, the more carefully you should check what they're hiding behind their back. Corliss Vexton had built an entire HOA career on that lie. After Elliot's delivery, and after the Strategic Crimes Division greenlit the case with full badge override clearance, I shifted from reaction to offense. I wasn't just submitting logs anymore. I was building a trap. Everything I needed was already there. Access timestamps, session tokens, camera feed hashes, firmware pings. But it had all come from my side. If Corliss denied it, and she would, it could still be spun as fabricated, until I proved she was still doing it. So I gave her something new to spy on. I rebuilt the lamp's firmware to run a bait protocol. Every time someone remotely attempted to access it, it would respond normally, but silently trip a local cascade trigger. The lamp wouldn't change. The stars would rotate like always. But the secondary microcontroller I'd embedded would begin logging not just pings, but actual active session parameters, device type, packet origin, timestamp, and injected command code. It wasn't illegal, it was defense. I also placed a decoy device in Lyra's closet, a hollowed-out Bluetooth speaker that looked like a gift. Inside was a pressure sensor and a passive acoustic mic, wired to detect ambient sound above 40 decibels. It wasn't a recording device, it was a verifier. If anyone touched it, moved it, or said anything near it, it would register. Then, I waited. I left the decoy speaker box in plain sight on her closet shelf. I even added a fake gift tag on top, from Dad, to make it look like a late birthday surprise. I adjusted the vent camera to show just enough. Let the window curtain drift open 1 inch more than usual. I sent the signal. We'd dropped our guard. 2 days later, it happened. At 2:18 a.m., the bait firmware caught an external handshake from the same mask subnet Thayer had used last month. It came in clean, with admin override and embedded commands to access light pattern controls. The code even included a test pulse. Someone wanted to see if they could modify the rotation remotely. But the signature wasn't Thayer's device. It was new MAC address, new OS signature, same routing protocol, still bouncing through the HOA's shadow node. Someone else was taking over. At 2:22 a.m., the closet sensor detected 3 soft pressure changes, barely enough to trigger, but just enough to register movement. The mic didn't catch speech, but it logged breathing. Someone was inside the room, again. Except this time, the lamp's firmware did more than just log. It activated a silent push to the case node we'd embedded in Strategic Crimes Response System. Live alert, logged metadata, breach attempt flagged in real time. By 2:24 a.m., an unmarked cruiser rolled down the block and stopped 3 houses away. They didn't need sirens. They weren't coming for noise. They were here for proof. I reviewed the feed 30 minutes later. The vent camera didn't catch a face, but it caught a shoulder, a jacket sleeve with a pin on the cuff. A small emblem in gold thread, the HOA board seal. Someone was still using internal credentials to commit felony trespass. But not Thayer, not this time. I ran a signature cross-check through the firmware logs. The access pattern was slower, less confident. They took longer to move around the room. The device they used stayed connected too long, over 42 seconds. Rookie mistakes. When I passed the metadata to the federal team, they looped me into a secure call. The digital profile doesn't match the prior actor, the agent said, but the access routing is identical. They're copying his method. Then it's someone Corliss trained, I replied, or someone trying to erase her trail. It didn't matter which, because either way, the system was turning on itself. That meant they were nervous, and that meant the trap was working. I stood in Lyra's room for a long time after the call ended, staring at the small blinking light under the speaker shelf. It had gone dark again. The trap had reset. I wasn't going to reset. I was going to finish this. The key to disarming a system built on silence isn't noise, it's exposure. I wasn't going to yell, file another complaint, or stand up at another board meeting just to be condescended to again. I was going to pull their foundation out from under them and let them collapse in front of their own neighbors. The plan started with metadata, always metadata. I mapped every access Thayer and the secondary intruder had made to our smart systems against the HOA's badge control logs. Time, signal type, location. But I wasn't just matching digital trails. I was overlaying them on top of the HOA's own published newsletters. They'd been hiding the break-ins behind scheduled safety audits, wellness checks, and resident concern visits. All of it framed as community service. There were 6 of them. 3 other families besides us had been listed in those reports, all with daughters. I didn't call them, not directly. That would have tainted the evidence chain. But I submitted an encrypted tip to Strategic Crimes with my full data overlay. 3 hours later, they called me back. "You're not wrong," the agent said, "but the others haven't come forward. They're scared." "I don't need them to come forward," I said. "I need you to be there when I make the data public. We can't interfere with a lawful HOA meeting unless there's an imminent threat." "Then give me the exact threshold for what classifies as imminent," I said. There was a pause. Then, "If you're planning a public release, make sure you have corroborated timeline evidence and raw source verification." "I do," and I did. Because while they were scrubbing logs, I was watching from inside. Every deleted session, every ghost swipe, every masked admin override, I had already duplicated their server pathing and streamed it to a cold storage vault hosted off-site. The original router Elliot had given me was still quietly forwarding those sessions in the background. A legal honeypot. All I had to do now was present it. The HOA board meeting was scheduled for Sunday at 4 p.m., held in the community clubhouse as always. Folding chairs, warm lemonade, an American flag in the corner. Just enough civility to make people think everything was fine. I arrived 10 minutes early with a neutral smile and a leather case containing 2 encrypted drives. Corliss was already there, chatting with a couple who looked like they'd just stepped out of a real estate brochure. She wore lavender that day. No pearls. Still poised. Still smug. "Dr. Train," she said as I passed, "here to contest another lighting ordinance?" "Not today," I replied. "Just observing." I set up near the back, across from the AV cabinet, and quietly connected a USB bridge to the projector port. Nobody noticed. They never did. They assumed anything technical belonged to Elliot, or to the HOA's new external compliance partner, whose name still hadn't appeared in any formal filings. The meeting began with budget updates, then landscaping proposals, then a motion to increase security camera coverage on non-compliant corners. And that's when I switched the projector feed. It started with a silent video, timestamp overlays, access badge pings, smart lock session logs. No narration, just data. Line after line of raw intrusion records synced with footage from Lyra's lamp and audio spectrograms from the bait mic. Someone gasped. Corliss turned slowly. "What is this?" she demanded. "Evidence," I said. "From your system." She moved to cut the feed. I stepped aside. "You'll want to be careful," I said. "Every keystroke on this network is currently being mirrored to Strategic Crimes. Any attempt to tamper with the display will trigger a subpoena extension." She froze. Two men stood quietly at the back of the room now, plainclothes, watchful. They didn't move. They didn't have to. The last file I played was a 3D heat map of movement in Lyra's room, rendered from the lamp's diagnostic sensor, one that showed the full silhouette of Thayer placing a camera on the shelf. People weren't looking at Corliss anymore. They were looking at each other. Whispers rose, then murmurs. Then one voice broke through. "My daughter's window faces that corner." And then another. "I saw Thayer on our lawn 2 weeks ago." Corliss tried to speak again, but it was too late. She was no longer running the room. I was, and I hadn't even shown them the worst of it yet. Corliss didn't show up to the next board meeting. She sent a proxy, Ramsey Hill, the HOA treasurer, a man with paper-thin glasses and a voice like static. He stood stiffly at the podium, clearing his throat like he was trying to swallow gravel, pretending the last meeting hadn't happened. "There will be no public comments today," Ramsey began. "We are reviewing certain internal matters and will not be fielding questions." The room didn't buy it. Everyone had seen the footage. Everyone had heard the silent clicks of session logs aligning with names they recognized, with places their children slept. It was no longer about violations or yard measurements. The conversation had changed, and Corliss's absence only made the truth louder. I didn't speak. Not yet. Instead, I watched the agents across the room. Still plainclothes, still quiet. They weren't here to supervise. They were here to listen, to observe behavior, to verify the final piece of the puzzle I was about to deliver. I'd waited for this moment, not out of revenge, but because timing mattered. Releasing too early would give them time to spin it. Releasing too late would let fear set in. But now, after Thayer's arrest, after the second breach attempt, after the footage played on a projector for an entire room to see, now was the moment. I stood slowly. No one interrupted. "I have one more data set," I said calmly. Ramsey opened his mouth, but the man beside him, a legal observer, likely HOA counsel, put a hand on his arm and whispered something low. Ramsey sat back down. I moved to the front and connected my drive to the podium monitor. This time, it wasn't a video. It was a live dashboard. "Each of these lines," I said, "is a confirmed override entry used to access private homes within Summerfield Bluffs. Here's the pattern. The screen filled with graphs, heat maps, access clusters, authorization overlaps. This," I pointed, "is Thayer Vexton. We've established his actions, but these," I toggled a new layer, "are Corliss Vexton's administrative fingerprints, the override logs, the deactivated notifications, the forged compliance notices." Murmurs rippled through the room. "And this," I clicked one final time, "is the real-time log of HOA credential activity from the last 48 hours. The screen changed again. One entry blinked red. "Someone accessed the compliance server at 3:14 a.m. this morning. Someone used her credentials to remove audit logs." Gasps now. One woman covered her mouth. A man near the back stood up and walked out, pale. I turned toward the legal observer. This system was set up to maintain neighborhood order. Instead, it was used to build a digital blind spot, an architecture of abuse hidden under language like maintenance and community values. Rowan was in the back, standing silent. He wasn't here as SWAT. He wasn't in uniform. He was here as Lyra's father, as my husband, as the man who had promised not to get involved unless the system failed. It had. Across the room, one of the agents stepped forward and handed a folded piece of paper to Ramsey. He opened it with a trembling hand. "Effective immediately," he read aloud. "Vice President Corliss Vexton is suspended from all HOA-related duties pending investigation. A temporary independent administrator will be assigned." No one clapped. It wasn't that kind of victory. Outside, the sky was dimming, the sun casting long shadows over the manicured hedges and white fencing. The kind of neighborhood sunset Corliss loved to photograph for the HOA newsletter, captioned with words like serenity and pride. But today the sky looked different. Raw, unedited, honest. I drove home slowly, watching the quiet shift of neighbors in their driveways, some nodding, some turning away, all of them changed by what they now knew. The myth of control had cracked. Inside, Lyra was building constellations on her tablet, designing new light patterns to replace the old ones. "Can I make my own now?" she asked. "You already are," I said. And as I watched the stars spread slowly across her screen, I knew the most dangerous thing Corliss had ever underestimated wasn't our silence. It was what we'd built when we refused to let her write the rules anymore. The press didn't arrive with cameras, not at first. They came with notepads and too polite expressions, the kind reporters wear when they don't quite believe what they're about to print. One by one, they trickled into the clubhouse on the morning of the emergency town hall, invited quietly by a parent from Elm Loop whose teenage daughter had once complained of someone watching her from a silver car parked by the community pool. By the time I arrived, there were folding chairs set up in rows, microphones clipped to the podium, and a tangle of power cords snaking toward a media box someone had rolled in from the trunk of a station wagon. It wasn't flashy, but it was enough. The HOA board, or what remained of it, was already seated. Ramsey looked paler than usual. He hadn't shaved. The new interim administrator, a woman named Lynna Carter from the county oversight office, sat 2 chairs away, her posture military straight and tablet in hand. Corliss wasn't there. She wouldn't be. Not with the warrant pending and federal charges under review. But her shadow still hung in the room, stitched into every policy, every smug clause of architectural enforcement that had been weaponized for power. I saw it in the way the neighbors refused to make eye contact, in the way Elliot stood near the back wall like a man ready to run if anyone raised their voice. I didn't sit. I walked to the podium when they called me, drive in hand. "This will be brief," I said. "I'm here to confirm the findings and ensure full transparency." I connected the drive, and the screen behind me lit up, not with footage this time, but with 3 simple charts: access attempts, credential overlap, and session persistence. This is the complete badge activity of the HOA's override system, color-coded by administrator. Every red mark is a session initiated without proper logging protocol. Every yellow mark is a deleted session that was recovered through the forensic archive. And every purple is a match between admin override and illegal entry, confirmed by federal metadata trace. I let the silence sit. These sessions correspond to 6 homes. 3 families have come forward. 3 have chosen not to, which is their right. But the data is immutable. The entries happened, the access occurred. The evidence has been validated by strategic crimes and is now part of a federal investigative file. I tapped the clicker and the screen changed. The override system, maintained under the authority of Vice President Corliss Vexton, was used to create a false layer of security within the neighborhood, one that allowed for intrusion, surveillance, and tampering under the guise of compliance. Her son, Thayer Vexton, used these backdoors to gain entry to private homes, including my own, and targeted bedrooms belonging to teenage girls. Gasps now. Audible discomfort. A woman near the 3rd row started crying quietly. I continued. This infrastructure was not an accident. It was engineered, and every board member who ignored discrepancies, who dismissed complaints, who waived policy reviews, bears part of that design. The room had gone still. I stepped back. "I'm not asking for votes or applause. I'm not here to prosecute you. I just want every resident here to understand. This silence is not neutrality. It's complicity." Ramsey stood slowly, voice shaking. "The board will be dissolved at the end of this session. An external administrator will assume temporary control until the annual election." Lynna nodded once. "All HOA technology systems will be independently audited. A third-party cybersecurity firm has been retained. Badge systems will be decommissioned and replaced with individual homeowner opt-in keys. Mandatory compliance checks are suspended indefinitely." Elliot stepped forward, hesitated, then finally spoke. "I'm sorry," he said, voice low but steady. "I should have spoken up sooner." "You did," I said, "when it mattered." The press asked questions. Some were technical, some invasive. I answered what I could. I avoided Lyra's name. I didn't mention the lamp. Some things still belonged only to us. As the crowd dispersed, a woman with a child clinging to her hip approached me. "She sleeps with her door locked now," the woman said softly. "But she told me she feels safer since that meeting. Since you spoke." I nodded, not trusting my voice. Outside, the clouds were clearing. The last of the morning haze burned off by sunlight that didn't feel borrowed anymore. For the first time in months, I didn't look over my shoulder, because there was nothing left behind me worth fearing. The night after the town hall, I stood outside our house, barefoot on the walkway, looking at the stars above our roofline. For months, I'd avoided standing there after dark. I couldn't bring myself to look at that window, at the faint glimmer from Lyra's planetarium lamp behind the glass. But tonight, it wasn't fear that kept me still. It was peace. Lyra's laughter drifted from inside the house, muffled through the walls. She was building her own constellations again, using the digital model she'd designed herself. Orion had a new arm now, and Cassiopeia had more stars. She told me it felt better balanced. I didn't tell her that's exactly what justice is supposed to feel like. Corliss Vexton's arrest hit the local papers the next morning. The headline didn't mention our names, just the HOA title, Vice President accused of data tampering and unlawful surveillance. Beneath it was a photo of her being led down the courthouse steps, head lowered, pearls gone, lavender replaced with gray. The article listed the charges: obstruction, conspiracy, unauthorized access, aiding and abetting criminal intrusion. The name, Thayer Vexton, followed a paragraph later, under awaiting sentencing. Elliot had testified under protection. The FBI confirmed his logs were authentic. The lamp footage had been verified as digital original, unaltered, unedited, timestamp matched with the security audit. Every layer of deceit she'd built had turned on itself. When the HOA board was formally dissolved 2 weeks later, Rowan stood beside me as the state-appointed administrator signed the final dissolution document. No applause, no speeches, just a click of pens and the sound of neighbors exhaling relief they didn't know they'd been holding. We stayed in Summerfield Bluffs. Most people assumed we'd leave, but the truth was, this house wasn't haunted anymore. It was reclaimed. Lyra's room wasn't a crime scene. It was a place of recovery. The lamp that once recorded an intruder was now certified evidence of survival. I told her that once, and she smiled. "Then it's my witness," she said. Every evening after that, when the stars filled her ceiling, I'd watch from the doorway and see her tracing the outlines of her constellations with her fingers, whispering names to them like they were promises. There was something holy about that. The neighbors started changing things too. The walls of silence began to crumble. The couple from Cedar Run offered to start a new neighborhood association, voluntary, transparent, without surveillance systems. Another resident, a retired police officer, began hosting digital literacy nights to teach parents how to protect their homes and networks from unauthorized access. Elliot volunteered to help. Quieter now, but steadier. It wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about rebuilding. On the day the new network grid went live, I reconnected the planetarium lamp to its original power source. Not the modified firmware, not the trap code, just the simple, unfiltered connection it had before all this began. Lyra sat cross-legged on her bed, waiting for me to flip the switch. When I did, the room filled with light, blue, gold, soft white shimmer like new snow under moonlight. The stars drifted across the walls, and for the first time, I let myself lie down beside her and look up. There was no shadow now, no intruder to watch for, just her stars, moving steady and slow. "I changed the patterns," she said quietly. "It doesn't show Orion anymore." "What's it show?" She pointed. "Home." And that was enough. I glanced once toward the window, where the faint glow of our porch light caught the street sign, Crescent Maple Drive, the same corner where this started, the same place Corliss once stood, telling me I was overreacting. The irony wasn't lost on me, neither was the victory. Justice didn't always roar. Sometimes it just breathed quietly, content in the knowledge that truth had finally been seen. If you've stayed with me through this story, I'll tell you this. Protecting your family doesn't always mean fighting harder. Sometimes it means documenting smarter, watching closer, refusing to be silenced even when the people hurting you hide behind laws and bylaws. That's what saved us. That's what stopped them. So, wherever you're watching from, if you've ever been told you were overreacting, remember this. The people who say that are counting on your silence. Don't give it to them. Subscribe to hear the next story before they try to bury it too.